All right, we will begin this webinar. My name is Sarah and I'm the Education and Public Programming Officer at the Rooms. Thank you for joining us for this online event for historic commemoration of barking traditions in partnership with Heritage NL. The Rooms respectfully acknowledges the province of Newfoundland and Labrador as the ancestral homelands of many diverse populations of Indigenous peoples who have contributed to 9,000 years of history, including the Beothuk on the island of Newfoundland. Today, this province is home to many diverse populations of Indigenous and other people. We would also like to acknowledge with respect the diverse histories and cultures of the Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit. So before we get into our presentations, I just want to review some housekeeping items for this session. Just a note that this webinar is set up, this Zoom meeting is set up as a webinar. So the speakers can't see or hear those of you at home, our participants. And the best way to connect with everyone is in the chat. So if you click on the chat feature through Zoom, you can connect with everyone and you can let us know where you are joining us from. We've had some people joining in from Northwest River and Conroy Valley and St. John. So thank you all for attending. If at any point you have any technical issues, please send a direct message to hosts and panelists, and we will assist you with any questions that you may have. You can also have the feature of raising your hand, and someone will message you directly to help you. There will be a question and answer period at the end of the formal part of the presentation, and Dale Jarvis, who's with Heritage NL, will be reading your questions to our speakers. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, or you can also use the Q&A feature through Zoom and submit your questions there. I will now pass things over to Dr. Lisa Daly, who is the chair of Heritage NL.
Thank you, Sarah. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Heritage NL, I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's Provincial Historic Commemorations Program ceremony. Heritage NL is a not-for-profit Crown agency of the Provincial Department of Tourism, Culture, Arts, and Recreation. Established in 1984, Heritage NL has a mandate to help preserve the rich heritage of Newfoundland and Labrador. We are celebrating 38 years of protecting, promoting, and preserving our province's built heritage. Heritage NL also supports the safeguarding of the province's intangible cultural heritage by working with communities and groups to document, pass on, and celebrate cultural traditions and traditional knowledge. Please feel free to follow us on social media or visit the heritagenl.ca website for our programs, events, outreach opportunities. In 2016, Heritage NL took on the Provincial Historic Commemorations Program from the provincial government. The program is guided by a selection committee comprised of myself, Joan Ritzy, and Olaf Jansen, as well as Andrea O'Brien of Heritage NL. Much thanks to the committee for its work in reviewing the applications and making recommendations to the Heritage NL board. Anyone can submit a nomination, and I encourage you to go to the Heritage NL website to view the guidelines and fill out the nomination form. I'd now like to introduce Joan Ritzy, who chairs the Provincial Historic Commemorations Program Committee. Joan?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of the Provincial Historic Designations Program Committee, welcome to this evening's ceremony. The Historic Commemorations Program was started to recognize aspects of our history and culture that have had a broad impact on our province. It's based somewhat on the National Historic Sites and Monuments Board, but this program, our program, also recognizes aspects of our cultural tradition and the living tradition bearers. With the addition of this evening's designation, the program has made 39 Commemorations. You can check out previous designations on the Discover section of Heritage NL's website. Our historic designation application process is very simple, and we'll help you with the process if you have questions. Anyone can submit a nomination because we're citizen-led, and we hope you will consider making a nomination to this committee. Information can be found on the Heritage NL website and also the Heritage NL Facebook page. I'd like to thank Minister Steve Crocker, the Provincial Minister of Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation, as well as my fellow members of the Designations Committee, Lisa Daly, Olaf Janssen, and NL, keep forgetting, Heritage NL staff member, Ms. Andrea O'Brien. This evening, we're recognizing barking and bark tanning as a distinctive cultural tradition and practice. So let's bring on folklorist Katie Crane to find out why she made this nomination. Thank you. Over to you, Katie.
Hi, my name is Katie Crane. I'm a PhD student in folklore at Memorial University, and I did a research paper when I worked for Heritage NL in 2020. And one of the projects that I worked on was researching barking and bark tanning. So I'm going to share a little bit about the history of barking and bark tanning in Newfoundland and Labrador. The tradition of bark tanning and the use of bark mixtures for the preservation of textiles has a long history in the province. In the 18th and 19th centuries, a large number of migrant fishermen from the British Isles began settling in Newfoundland and Labrador, bringing with them lexical items which took root in the local vocabulary, one of which was the word barking, to refer to steeping fabric or hide in an infusion of bark, or to immerse a fishing net in the liquid formed by the boiling of bark and buds of trees as preservatives. The communal vessel in which nets or sails were submerged was known as a barking kettle, a barking pot, or a bark pot, and the bark infusion it was steeped in would protect against rot. The word was also used in local place names, and the memory of its use is retained today in place names like Barking Kettle Pond in Portugal Cove, St. Phillips, Bark Pot Swimming Hole in Flat Rock, and the Old Bark Pot Municipal Heritage Site in Fairyland. Late April and early May were the barking days in many communities, and the equipment required wasn't complicated. The barking kettle was an iron pot that resembled a witch's cauldron or a kerosene drum cut in half. Other equipment used was a flour barrel tub, a puncheon or half puncheon, and a piggin for dipping out the bark. The mixture of materials was used to tan textiles, and it varied over time and between communities. It could contain a combination of ingredients, including red ochre, cod oil, seawater, beeswax, and other bark extracts. Red ochre and oil added weight to canvas sails, but it made them durable, supple, and waterproof. Cod oil might be added to keep twine supple as the barking mixture cured, and traps which were barked would be left in the mixture for a couple of days if possible. On the south coast of Newfoundland, black spruce bark was desired, but red and white spruce bark was used as well, and birch and alder were also used. Fishermen often made do with what they had available, and they tweaked their own mixtures. While barking lingered well into the 1950s, changes in techniques began half a century earlier. Bark pots were once community owned, but by the turn of the century, privately owned bark pots were available to fishermen for a fee. Pre-barked nets became available to purchase, which marked the beginning of the end for the traditional barking and bark pots. In 1923, a local newspaper lamented, quote, "Those old barking kettles and the old customs which they served and which they represented have all departed," end quote. By mid-century, the tanning of nets was no longer necessary as nylon twine replaced cotton twine in fishing nets. And later, monofilament line was introduced, which had practically an unlimited lifespan. Barking was also used to tan animal hides into usable leather. In Newfoundland and Labrador, we can see different leather making skills, which would ultimately meet and inform each other, Indigenous and European skinworking traditions. Some of the earliest evidence of bark tanning in Newfoundland and Labrador comes from the Dorset culture who lived near Port au Choix around 2140 before Common Era. Seals hunted in the area would be processed into leather. The skin would be cleaned of meat and degreased using blunt scrapers to press the oil out. It would then be stretched on a frame or softened by chewing or stamping on the skin. The hides would be soaked in a pond for a period of time to loosen the hair. Sealskins might be soaked in a solution of bark and salt to preserve and waterproof them, as well as add color. European leather making traditions were brought to the province with European settlers, and a small tanning industry was established in Newfoundland in the late 1800s. A number of leather workers and shoemakers operated small works through the 1880s, although by the 1880s, the tanning industry blossomed in tandem with the expansion of the shoe and boot making industry. Commercial tanneries likely imported their required tannins instead of using local bark. Both tanneries and local shoe manufacturers went into decline by the early 20th century as they could not compete with imported goods. The manufacture of sealskin boots was an important part of rural life, especially on the Great Northern Peninsula and along the coast of Labrador. The tradition has been heavily influenced by Inuit traditions as Inuit married into settler families. Along the Strait of Belle Isle, sealskin boots were made using the same designs as Inuit skin boots and were barked, as this was considered more aesthetically pleasing than fur boots. Sewing of sealskin boots was considered to be women's work on the Great Northern Peninsula, but the preparation of the skins was left to the men. Rinds of spruce and fir would be used in the barking solution and left to soak for up to a month, resulting in a yellow color. Variations in water, bark, or drying time meant the difference between good and bad skins. St. Barnabas Anglican Church in Flowers Cove was funded through the sale of locally made sealskin boots, and women would gather in the basement workshop to sew the sealskin. In spite of experiments in mass production, bark tanning of sealskin and boot making remained a cottage industry. A similar barking process was used for the coloring of canvas for wearable use. In Labrador, loosely fitted pullover hooded jackets called cossacks would be barked at certain times of the year. Cossacks would be made out of cotton duck, which is a white fabric, and great camouflage in the winter, but in the fall, a darker color was necessary, and cossacks would be barked. The bark would need to be strained from the barking solution, and the fabric would need to be moved around in the barking solution, otherwise the color would collect in certain areas of the fabric more than others. Barking the fabric also helped give it new life when a Cossack was older and dingy. We will come back to the Cossacks in a minute. Bark tanning is a good example of different skills coming together to create something new. Indigenous peoples and settlers use barking in multiple ways to preserve textiles for sustainable use. Barking is also a skill that continues to reinvent itself and find new uses and applications in the province. And before I pass it over to Cynthia, Dale is going to model a barked Labrador Cossack.
So this is the Cossack that Katie had a picture of there. So this is from Dave Lowe's personal collection from the 1970s. Dave was too shy to come and model it for us himself. So this just gives you an example of what a Cossack made on the Labrador Straits would have looked like around 1974. And with that, we're going to head off to the Labrador Straits and we're going to turn things over to Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy or Cynthia Colosimo Robbins. I'm a member of the Labrador Artisans Co-op in the Labrador Straits, where that Cossack was made, and where there are still quite a number of people who know how to bark. And our co-op talked to a number of ladies in the region, and we've been using barking in developing our products. And I'm just going to switch to my slideshow here. And somebody give me a notice for time if I go over, please. All right. Oh, I need to share my screen. Hang on. I'll get this figured out. Hang on. Share screen. All right. And share. Go from beginning. Come on. There, I've got it figured out. As I said, we're in the Labrador Straits, and what we set out to do with our co-op, we're fairly new. We got our start just before COVID, so we had one summer of testing our product in the market, and then everything shut down for 2 years. So we're just about to get started again and make product for the summer. It looks like we're going to have a good summer for tourists this year with come home year. Things are booking up, ferries are booked up in the accommodation. So we're expecting to see some visitors. But what we set out specifically to do was to work with the tourism sector. And we wanted to, there was a gap in the market for high quality products that were made in Labrador and available in the gift shops in the local area. We wanted to make products that we really enjoyed making that also told something about the region and used materials from the region and designs from the region. And we started out as a project as a business development project to set up a co-op. And you can see in the photo here, there's a Cossack designed by Karen Pye, who's on our left. And this is a new Cossack with an old design, and we've dip dyed it. We didn't immerse it completely in bark. Karen immersed the fabric for the hood and the pocket, and then dip dyed the hem and the sleeves. And I think she's also got some sprinkle dyed lining in the hood and in the cuffs. And it's a unisex style. So that's designed by Karen, and we have a really good group of everybody has their own specialty. Somebody's good at dyeing, somebody's good at drawing, somebody's good at designing. Karen is a fashion designer, and that's been a really great help to us. And we've used barking in a number of products. Our co-op started out specifically to work with heritage tourism, and there's over 30 years of heritage tourism projects in the region. The Women's Institute did a lot of work with the Labrador Craft Producers Association in making sure that traditional skills were taught through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The Labrador Straits Historical Development Corporation has had a number of projects, a Heritage Regions project and heritage preservation projects that we're building on. Quebec Labrador Foundation had a traditional skills network where craft producers made traditional crafts in places where visitors were. And so many of these projects, and in particular for us, there was an oral history project about 10 or 12 years ago that collected stories, photos, music, specifically to create tourism products. And we created a cookbook and a CD. And that oral history project collected a couple of stories about barking that really helped us when we started out our co-op. All of our members participated in the Craft Council's product development workshops for historic sites through Craft Labrador. And we're continuing our heritage learning by participating in a weaving mentorship very soon with Heritage NL. We inherited a loom from the Women's Institute, and we don't know how to use it. So the weaving mentorship came about at a perfect time for us. And here are some of our barked products. As you can see, some are dip dyed, some are immersed. The green in the middle comes from Labrador tea, and we've been experimenting. We're not experts by any means in using natural dyes. That's Susan's job. She'll tell you that after I'm finished. But we like the way dip dyeing works, and you get some color variations. And we've experimented with alder and birch and spruce, and it smells fantastic when it's cooking. When you've got a pot of spruce on, the whole place smells like Christmas. It's amazing. And so we also do block printing, and we do our own designs. And the Labrador designs have been very popular, especially with Labrador shoppers. And so why do we add barking? Barking really adds value. It adds visual impact. It adds an interesting story about Labrador, and it makes the product a piece of Labrador that you can take home with you, whether you're a visitor or you're a local shopper. The barking seems to be really important for our local shoppers. In the past 2 years during COVID, we've only been selling, within Labrador. But as you can see from these photos, the apron on the left was our first apron we were making and selling. And the one that's barked and has the pocket on it is much more and has sold much better than the original one that was just stamped with a design. And on the right, you can see that the barking really adds to the printing. There's one of those scarves has huskies on it, and I never really liked the husky, but it does look great on a bark scarf. I found him a little funny looking, my husky. But again, the Labrador twig, the husky, the snowshoes, that plus barking, plus cotton duck, which is a locally used material. It's the material that you make your Cossacks out of. It's all part of making a product that is about Labrador and tells something about the people here. So as I've just been saying, our Labrador shoppers, they know about barking already. And so when they see it, they're really interested. And they're often buying these items as gifts to send away to someone from Labrador who lives away. We also make Labrador tea dyed products. It's a similar process, sticks in the pot and boil them up. And Valerie O'Brien is our dyeing expert. She's done 2 workshops. Susan had done a workshop in our area years ago, must be more than 10 years ago now. And Valerie had done that. And then when the co-op did training, we brought in Anna Murphy to teach us natural dyes and much more. And the rest of us learned alongside. But Valerie's had a double dose of education, and she's very good at the dyeing. And you can see here the whale bags have been barked. There's aprons, there's placemats, there's pot holders and tote bags, and some of the yarns are dyed with Labrador tea. We did try dyeing yarn or barking the yarn. It came out kind of a wishy-washy nude color, but then we sprinkle dyed on top of that, and it was kind of interesting, but we haven't really pursued barking yarn. But the Labrador tea dyed yarn is something that, again, our Labrador shoppers really, really like. And so here are some of the Labrador tea products, the yarns in yellow and green, the tote bag, and we've been doing Labrador tea printed and dyed scarves this year. That was a new product. When we're selling to visitors, they have to learn about barking. Now, some of the visitors who go to Battle Harbor learn about barking as part of the story that's told at Battle Harbor. They learn about the fishermen barking their nets. So some of the visitors might know a bit about it if they're traveling through the region, but they're not going to know what it is when they first see it. So we often include an information card in our displays, and that helps. But it also helps if you're selling in a shop and you're not selling it yourself. It helps to do some education with the shop owner or shop manager, whoever's selling the product, because if the person selling it doesn't really know what it isn't that value-added product anymore. And here is where we got our best recipe, and we did talk to a lot of people, and we heard some of the same information over and over. We heard people tended to use the bark from the trees that grew near where they were. So in the Pinware Valley, where there's a lot of birch, they would use the birch, and it's the inner rind of the birch that they'd use. Ruby Cabot, the late Ruby Cabot, in her oral history interview about sealskin boot making, she talked about using birch rather than alder because it gave a redder color. She was looking for a redder color in her sealskins for her sealskin boot making. And Kathleen O'Brien did a really wonderful interview with our Coastal Heritage Project in 2008 about barking a Cossack. And that interview, for anybody that would like to go see it, it's on a website. The Women's Work website is at coastalheritage.ca. And in the menu, you look for women's domestic work and then skills and traditions. And there are icons for look, listen, and read. Look takes you to photos, listen takes you to audio recordings, and read takes you to transcripts. So on that website, there's Kathleen's transcript and audio recording, and there's a transcript of Ruby Cabot talking about sealskin boot making. In the photo down at the bottom left are two gentlemen from Lansalou wearing Cossacks that are not barked. Yeah, we were told that by some of the local ladies that it was great to bark them to cover up the dirt once they were getting a bit worn. And they would always tell us that you want to keep stirring the pot and keep the fabric moving in order to get a solid color. But when we're doing things, we kind of like playing with it so that we're not getting a solid color. So we'll scrunch it up in the pot, or we'll dip dye it to get some color variations because we find that more interesting. But Kathleen's recipe, and I'm just going to run over that very quickly for you, because if you're here to learn about barking, this is an actual recipe. And as I said, it's available on the coastalheritage.ca website. But the important points, I mean, she starts with the interview with, you go in the forest and cut your alder trees. So you rind the alder, and the word rind, like the word bark, can be a noun and a verb. So you're taking the rind off or the bark off. And she says you keep the rind in a container for a few days until it turns brown, and that the best time for getting it is late summer, early fall, and you want to do it before the trees go dormant. I'm sure Susan can tell us the scientific information behind that. But I'm guessing it's because the tannins are good then. So then she fills a large boiler with water, and she puts in about 2 gallons of the alder bark or the rind. And she lets it simmer and brings it to a boil, boils it for about 2 hours, then adds 2 tablespoons of salt. And she says that the salt helps the bark to go into the material. Then she simmers it for about 6 hours until she sees the color of the bark going through the water. And she adds 2 tablespoons of baking soda. And she cautions to not add the full amount at once, just gradually add it until it dissolves. Otherwise, it'll fizz up like a volcano at the science fair. And keep simmering and check the bark. And she says if it's not dark enough, you could always add more soda, baking soda. And she strains it after it's been boiling, and straining it, you take out the little bits that might get into your fabric and are hard to get off. And again, she says to keep turning the cotton duck so that the material won't go spotty. And she does that until the water cools down. And after so many hours, she doesn't specify how many hours, she said if you leave it all night, the bark will lodge on the material in different spots, and it'll be darker in some spots and lighter in the others. So to get an even color, you want to keep it moving and then take it out. And then she said you can put it on the clothesline to dry or in the dryer. And she said she found that she got a more even fabric by putting in the dryer. And in Ruby's interview, again, she goes through the whole process of preparing the skins for making sealskin boots. But she does specify that she prefers birch because she gets a redder color. And she talks the same thing. She talks about keeping the skin moving in the pot to get an even color. And that's about it for me. And our next presenter is Susan Furneaux, who can correct any mistakes I've just told her. And I'm sure she will be very informative. I'm very looking forward to what she has to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was great. It's great to see the product evolve. Really great to see the new things. Yeah, spectacular. I am a natural dyer by trade, and I teach at the College of the North Atlantic, natural dyes and hand embroidery. And my love of all things textile has sort of led me down this path. For many years, I was a natural dyer, and as Cindy said, tannins are really important to the dye industry as well, because in order to fix the color, even if you're using exotic things like cochineal from Mexico or lac from Malaysia, you need to have those. You need to have the tannin in your cotton, any cellulose fiber like linen or cotton. Traditionally, or hemp was always given a pre-bath in tannin in order to get the color to attach. So for years I've been tanning cloth in order for this to get my color. In about 5 or 10 years ago, my studio shifted. How I work my studio shifted. And I started to use all local material. Now, I had known about bark tanning for years because I knew the ladies from the Northern Peninsula who came to the craft fairs about 20, 25, 30 years ago. So I was always kind of fascinated in this, and I did a lot of research to kind of see where, how to do it. It was just so magical to be able to take skins and turn them into leather with bark. I just thought it was great. So I did a lot of research, and because I was using materials that were all locally sourced, I just kind of dove in and kind of figured it out by talking to people up on the Northern Peninsula, talking to people in Europe, and talking to people in the States. And the picture that you see here is a picture of cod skin. That was one of my first forays into bark tanning. And this is just a piece of cod skin that, I tried. I love the fish skins. I have to say, they are just so wonderful in the bark tan. It happens so quickly. It's, and it just the pattern, it's just as a visual artist, it's beautiful. And I can stitch onto them with embroidery. It's great. So just want to flick this slide, advance the slide, I guess, or the image. Okay, so as I started getting better and better, I started to go with bigger and bigger things. So this is a piece of seal that somebody was a landsman got the seal for us, so we had to clean it and everything, which was the biggest amount of work. And this is seal. Now I use all black spruce. And one of the reasons is I just love the smell and I love the color and I love everything about it, working with the spruce. Also, there's a lot of it here in my garden. I don't have a whole lot of birch. I do have a lot of oak trees. When I built the house, I planted, 17 oaks. So this year in the mentorship program, we're actually going to try some oak and see how that works. But I really love the spruce. And I knew I loved working with the spruce because I'd done it with fabric. I've done alder on fabric as well. But the spruce is just the color. Oh, it's just magical. So this is a bag that's seal. It doesn't retain any of the scent of the seal, which is really surprising. I also work with goat, and I also take all the hair off. I have taken all the hair off. This year, I'm going to experiment with leaving fur on and seeing how that works out, because I believe that the fur will dye and take up that really nice, yummy red color as well. So you just want to advance. Okay, so this is sort of the beginning of, and people kind of spoke to this, the process. So I'm just going to run through the process really quickly. One of the things about the process is that it is very natural. I don't even use salt. I use water and I use spruce bark. That is it. I have a pond that's on my mother's property that I use to take the hair off. So this is just cleaning up the back of, this is a goat skin that's getting the back cleaned off, not the seal. The seal was, I guess we had to cut through about 2 inches of blubber to get the, to get down to the where it was. It was the seal was a long process. And then there's a seal. This is the skin here that is on the frame, getting ready to go into the pond. The yellow that you see on the pelt is actually it's fat. So you know, and it wasn't that smelly or anything, but you know, this is getting prepared to go into the pond. Can you pass a slide over? So here it is in the pond, and you can see the pond around here, as they are in Newfoundland and Labrador, they have tannin in them themselves from the trees that are falling in there and the leaves that are falling in there. So the yellow that you see is actually the tannin that is in the pond water. This is a very small pond, more of a gully really. And this was laid in there and weighed down. You can see rocks on the corners. And there's a goat in there as well underneath. And this was put in for about 6 weeks in the pond. And this happened in June, I guess, towards the first, well, you can see the irises are out there, just coming out there. So it was probably like late June. I harvest all my bark in April. I'm harvesting this year, myself and Nicole are harvesting on April the 16th or the 15th, that's Saturday. Because it's like Cindy said, it's early spring before just as the plants are sending up the life into the needles, or it's in the fall. So I do all my bark tanning for leather in the spring of the year, and I harvest spruce because I can use the spruce poles then that I've taken the bark off of. I can use them for fence posts and things, and I use alder in the summer for tanning my fabric for dyeing, because the alder doesn't have very much color. It's a very pale color. The tannin is virtually clear, so it doesn't impact the color of the cloth. Okay, do it again. Okay, so this here is taking off the fur after it's been in the pond. So I use a spoon. You can see on the seal is on the left, the darker one. And that I had to scrape that a little bit, but it's just a plastic spoon. It was not very hard at all. And you can see the goat, which is on the right side, that just peeled off in sheets, the hair. And like, I guess to take the hair off after it'd been sitting in the pond this probably took an hour for both hides. If you're using the traditional scraping method for hides, without doing any of this, it is not pleasant, but this was really kind of satisfying, just pulling the hair off in big sheets. It was pretty neat how it worked. Okay, so the next one. So on the right is the seal, on the left is the seal bag again, and you can see that it's all wrinkly. The reason is because I didn't stretch it when I put it in the barking solution. And it's just because I just didn't have a barking pot big enough. And I think if you really wanted a seal to be, I'm not sure how they do it on the Northern Peninsula. I'm just going by what I've done because it's all been sort of trial and error. I could have moved it a little bit more, possibly changed it, but I really love the variations in the texture that is in the bag and in the seal. It's just, it's all part of it, and it's just really, really beautiful, all the variations. And in some places the bark took up the leather took the tanning up darker. You can see wrinkles. It's like skin. It's pretty neat. On the right hand side, that is the goat. The goat is thin. I can embroider through it. It's different texture. It's nice, but the seal is something else. you know, and this was a big seal. It's fairly thick. It's a lot thicker than what they use in the skin boots. I guess it was an older seal, but you know, I wouldn't want to have to sew those little pleats in there or anything. But the goat is pretty straightforward and pretty thin, and all the color you see is the color from the tanning solution. There's no other dye used here. Okay, do you want to turn again? Okay, so this is sort of my work and where I'm going with my work, and this is all this is cod skin. And there's moose hair, and I use the front and the back of the cod skin, and the other part is squirrel fur, and that's what I'm like. I tanned a lot before I sort of made the jump into bark tanning. Had I known what it entailed, I would have done it a lot sooner, but I thought that you know, it was a big mystery, and it was all, you know, and once I started looking and once I did it, I said, my gosh, I can't believe that, like, no, everybody's not doing this. Like, it's so magical and it's so beautiful, and the process is just, you know, you're out in the woods, you're gathering things, everything in the spring, it all smells nice, and then when you've got your tea made, it's just smells so wonderful, and even when you pull out the seal, just the whole thing is just so magical and so lovely and so non-toxic. Like, there's nothing. It's just bark and water. And, you know, it's really exciting to me that people are starting to get back into this and want to work with this, because it's just, you know, it's, you know, sure, there's a lot of science around it, and, you know, the tannins, and you have to be careful, especially with bigger hides, that things don't case. And that's a technical term, so that the outside of the leather tans, but the inside doesn't. And that leads to rot on the inside of your leather. And that's why you can't really do, you know, cow hides or things with this process. It's a little bit harder, and you got to have, you know, a little bit more bigger bins than what I've got. But you know, for smaller hides and fish skins, which are in abundance here in the province, I mean, it's just a wonderful technique, you know. And I'm just really glad that it's you know, I mean, I didn't discover it, obviously, but if I had known, I would have jumped into it a lot earlier, because I was afraid that it was just going to be smelly and messy. And once I got comfortable with tanning hides commercially, then with the commercial, you know, things that you buy, the chemistry from Quebec, and, you know, do the whole thing. But once I got comfortable with that, I said, I can't be that bad. But I mean, it's so much more superior as a form of preserving hides. It's just phenomenal. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'll pass it over to Dale. But this is where I am. So if anybody has, this is another little fish skin. And I'm in Conception Harbor, so I'm just outside town. I did used to do a lot of stuff I live downtown St. John's, but I had to move out of the city in order to be doing all this kinds of things that I do. But yeah, so it's a great process, and I really just love everything about it. And I'm really looking forward to it, because not only you know, learning new things as I'm teaching and working with Nicole, I mean, trying new things, but it's also, we're going to be getting some interesting fish skins from up in Labrador, and, you know, it's going to be great. I'm really excited.
So with that, maybe we'll ask some of our guests. We'll ask Cindy to come back, but we're also going to bring in Nicole Travers, who is joining us today. Thank you all for your presentations. I've got lots of questions. One of the things that Heritage NL has been working on over this past year is a new mentor-apprentice program, which Susan referenced. And so Nicole is one of our apprentices. The idea behind the program is that we fund a partnership where a mentor, an experienced knowledge holder, takes on an apprentice to teach them skills. And so Nicole, through this process, has been working or is going to be working with Susan. Nicole, maybe if I could ask you just to kind of introduce yourself and what is your interest with this whole type of tradition of preparing materials?
Okay, so I'm on the west coast of the island, so I can't get much further away from Susan for this mentorship, but I'm very pleased and very honored to be able to participate with this. I was introduced, I've always been very interested in traditional forms of tanning, and I've never, unlike Susan, I've never used commercial tanning chemicals in order to tan different types of materials. I started a few years ago tanning fish skins using tea tannins, fell in love with it. I mean, I grew up understanding that bark tanning used to be a very traditional method here in Newfoundland and Labrador. I didn't know much about it. When I was in my early 20s, I bought a pair of mucklucks from the Northern Peninsula, Chemics from the Northern Peninsula, and love the color, love how it's done, love the idea, and love the fact that it's very environmentally friendly. So it just made sense to me once I learned how to tan the fish skins that learning this newer method, it felt great. Also, I know that it's been a dying tradition, and I love sharing, and I do share with people who want to learn because I do beadwork and do other things, and I teach what I can when I can, and that's my whole intention, is that I want to help try to revive this last technique, this last thing here on the island.
We have a question from someone in the audience. Who's saying they are in St. John's. Tara Murphy is saying she doesn't have a pond or doesn't have a stream of her own in which to soak her skins. And she's interested about salmon skin. Is it possible to do this if you don't have a pond? Can you do it in a smaller space?
Oh, yes, for sure. You only need the pond when you're taking off, you want to get the fur off, because the little microbes kind of eat at the fur at the base, and that helps you, break down that sort of attachment. So if you want to use just straight up fish skins, for sure, you can do that in in an ice cream tub if you want.
And you said that the fish skins tan fairly quickly.
Yeah.
So when you say how long a process is that?
Well, it kind of does depend on, temperature. I do everything outside, obviously, but it does kind of depend on temperature and, the skins themselves. But I mean, you could probably have one tanned in 4 weeks, right? The only thing, if you're in town, I would suggest trying to collect rainwater or using distilled water, because you don't want to have all those additives in your tanning solution, so that's the only caveat I would have there. And you could try all kinds of things on a small scale. You could try there's many sources of tannin, like even pomegranate rinds are a really strong source of tannin if you wanted to really get into the experimentation of it. There's lots of good information out there about tannins and sources of tannin, both local and exotic. We
have another question in the Q&A section, and if you have questions, just type them into the Q&A section below, and we'll try and answer all your questions. Heather Engetok has been doing some work of her own. She's talking about cleaning seal skins and sewing with natural skin for making mitts and bags and moccasins. She has a question about keeping the skin in the pond for fur. So if you were working with seal skin, for example, how long does it need to soak for the fur to get to a point where it comes off more readily? Again,
it is an organic process, so there are a lot of variables. I left mine in for about 6 weeks. But if you're close to the pond, I would say after about 2 weeks, if it's warm, if you've got a warm pond, I'd start pulling, because once it's ready, it comes right off. You'll know immediately that it's good to go. And you could start probably at three weeks or so, and then just go out and just try to pull a little tuft off every now and then. As soon as you'll know. It's no longer than 6 weeks, I wouldn't say, unless it was an unusually cold summer.
Mina Campbell, hi Mina, has to leave. She's heading off to a meeting. She's zooming in from Central Labrador. An ulu maker, and she's cleaning her sealskins with an ulu, and she would love to learn to tan them with fur on. So I think we might need to do a whole other session at some point just to talk about the process of tanning, because I think it is something that people are interested in. One of the questions, we have a question from Merle and Burr, and I might be able to answer this one, about the term kutch used in the tanning of nets, twine, and rope. So this was a type of material that became available kind of towards the mid-1800s, available right up until the early 20th century. You would see ads in the old newspapers for fisherman's kutch, or sometimes it would be called kachechu. And it was a preparation of bark that you could buy. It was imported, and some of it was coming from as far away as Malaysia. There's a really interesting story about Sir James Pearl, after whom Mount Pearl is named. He had a plantation in Singapore, and he had started to grow peppers on his plantation. But before that point, it was used for growing a plant called a gambier, which is one of the plants that they used for making kutch. So these kind of exotic materials ended up all the way here for fishermen to use for barking nets. We also had a question here as well about Mina was just asking about kind of stitching and making waterproof stitches for making boots. Does anyone have any experience with that kind of stitch work?
I do not. And that was one of the reasons I got into it. The beauty of the pleated boot is something else. Those little pleats, it's just gorgeous. But I'm sure somebody from Labrador would definitely have that information.
Megan Sams, also a great font of knowledge about natural materials, tells us that kutch is the reduced sap from the kutch tree, a member of the acacia family. So there you go. All kinds of different materials end up being used for this type of stuff. I'm curious, one thing that Cindy was talking about was about this process of kind of learning from the past and using the material that came from oral histories and whatnot. What do you think, what have you had, and this is maybe for the three of you, what do you have most questions about? What do you wish people had passed down more information about? Where are the gaps in our knowledge right now?
I think the gaps are in the actual practitioners, the people that know how to do it are pretty old right now. And whether it's embroidery, we did a duffel workshop a few years ago to make duffel slippers, because a lot of that duffel work hadn't been passed down. And in the workshops discovered that people didn't know how to embroider. And so then we did an embroidery and beadwork workshop. But I think there's a lot of things, but there's a gap, and we lost people since 1992. We've lost population, and those younger people that moved away since that time didn't learn at home from the hand of their mothers and grandmothers. Skin boot making is one that's really very few people here still doing.
Yeah, we were having a conversation with some people from Nunatsiavut, and they were saying the black bottom boot, skin boot tradition is kind of fragile. There are a couple people left who still know how to make it, but it's not a widespread body of knowledge. So yeah, we kind of need to capture some of this stuff, and I think programs like the Mentor Apprentice program are really useful in that you can kind of get your hands dirty and get down and do this stuff, and hopefully we'll see some of these skills passed along.
In a lot of community learning projects that I've been part of, it was important to have a community champion. So you had somebody that had a lot of knowledge that lived in the community and would pass it along, whether it was computer training or craft training, whatever it was. But having those community champions was always really important for community-based learning.
Yeah, I believe that as well. And the skin boots, that's a tough one, you know, like it's a huge gap there. But also I really want to, you know, things like communication now. There may be people who forgot to know how to embroider or to do this or bead in some areas, but in other places it's thriving. And you know, at the College of the North Atlantic, we teach all these skills, but people don't understand or don't know that the program exists, or, you know, that people are doing it in other places. And I think that one of the great things about a project like this is bringing all the players to the table and creating documents so that people, if somebody wants to know how to weave and they're out there and they're saying, oh, I can't find any information, you know, like there are people teaching weaving skills and have been for, you know, a while through the college, you know, on their own, you know, like in their workshops. And I mean, it's just getting the word out that there's people out there willing to give of their time to teach things. Like myself, Cindy, Megan is somebody else. Like there's so many, and Nicole, sharers of skills out there. It's just that there seems to be a lack of communication or one place that everybody can go to find this information. I think that's, you know, that's another thing, you know, where do you go to learn? That's what people keep asking me. And there's lots of places to go to learn. Now, obviously boots are a problem and bark tanning is a long, arduous process. So, you know, as easy as it is, but so it takes a little bit longer, but you know, it's important to have a database somewhere of all these skills and the people who are practicing and the people who are, you know, because I think for the most part, everybody who's involved in this program is happy to pass along any knowledge they have. And it's been that way in the craft industry for years, you know, like that's how we get by. So I really think that this is a great program because it will bring everybody to the table and, you know, and make everybody aware.
One of the things we did when we started our craft co-op, one of the reasons we did it was that nobody from our area was taking that program at the college. And so there were a lot of skills we weren't having here. And what we did was set out to hire a graduate from the college program to come in and then do training, a month of training with our craft people so that we could kind of bring that knowledge into the local area.
We're drawing to the kind of the end. I feel we could keep going on and on about this. And I think there's some good ideas here, maybe for us at Heritage NL to think about in terms of how maybe we can help to bring people together and share a bit more of this knowledge. One of the questions in the chat was about financial accessibility of some of these things. And we know that is a challenge, you know, for certain practitioners. And so it's something that we want to try to help with. What part of the reason for doing the Mentor Apprentice program is often, you know, people pass along these skills and they get a lot of demand placed on them for sharing, but they don't get, they still need to eat, you know, they still need to buy materials and whatnot. So if we can build better systems to help kind of funnel some money towards craft practitioners and whatnot, that would be a fabulous thing. Just to wrap up, I'm going to say thank you to our three panelists. And before we go, I just, Nicole, maybe I want to end with you. What are you most excited about with the work you're going to do? Is there a certain part of this you're most looking forward to getting your fingers into?
I honestly love being able to be involved with it from beginning to end. So I've got some rabbit skins. I'm hoping to get a couple of goat skins. I've got lots of eel skins. I've got a seal skin. For me, it's again, it's the connection from beginning to end, to scraping the flesh off the hides, to I'm excited for next weekend to start pulling the bark off the lungers. And when I learn and somebody asks questions and want to learn, I'm going to be so excited to be part of this revitalization, if we can get it that far, and to help people learn. And I know there's the excitement out there, because I've told people that have been part of it, and they're like, oh, when you know, can you share it with me? I'm like, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, it's an exciting part.
Thank you. We had one question about kind of some of the European antecedents of some of these traditions. And maybe what I'll get Andre to do while Sarah wraps up is to post the link to the research paper that Katie and I did, because it does go into some of that European early history as well. So again, thank you all to our panelists for coming and sharing their incredible enthusiasm for this old tradition. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Sarah at the rooms.
Thank you, Dale, and thank you to all of our participants for joining us on a Tuesday night. We hope you walk away with some new information and appreciation for this wonderful skill and craft at risk, and hopefully no longer, with the great work of Cindy and Nicole and Susan. So thank you, everyone. We also like to thank Heritage NL for partnering with the rooms for this event, especially the staff, Dale Jervis and Andrea O'Brien. Also want to thank Dr. Lisa Daly, who's chair of Heritage NL, Katie Crane for recommending bark tanning for this commemoration, Cindy, Susan, and Nicole, thank you for sharing your knowledge and for being with us tonight. So we appreciate all of you for joining us, and we hope you had a lovely Tuesday evening. And if you want to check out some bark tanning products in person, there are items available in the gift shop from the Labrador Artisan Co-op, where they have totes that are available. So you can check our gift shop out. That is open tomorrow at 10 a.m. and will be open until 9 p.m. So that's it for us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and we hope you had a great night.